I'm not looking for trouble with you, Marshal. This Jerry here's got me all riled up, him and that girl.
I don't know. But I'll tell you something, Doc. You better not mess around with Nades there.
Sir Ken Curtis, a name forever tied to the legendary character Festus from Gunsmoke, the scruffy deputy with sharp wit, quick humor, and a heart of gold. On screen, he captured the hearts of millions with his down-to-earth charm, becoming one of the most beloved figures in television westerns. But, like many Hollywood stars, Ken's real life wasn't as easygoing as the roles he played. Behind that warm smile were hidden conflicts, grudges, and disappointments he kept buried for years. What few people know is that before his passing, Ken Curtis revealed for the first time 6 names of stars he simply could not stand. People who left such a deep impression on him that he carried those feelings to the very end of his life. In this video, we'll uncover those shocking revelations, explore the real stories behind the feuds, and learn why Ken Curtis finally decided to speak out. But before we dive in, if you're a fan of Ken Curtis or love classic Western films, don't forget to hit subscribe so you won't miss more fascinating stories like this. Ken Curtis, born Curtis Wayne Gates on July 2, 1916, in the small town of Lamar, Colorado, had a childhood that was worlds apart from the glitz and glamour of Hollywood, and unlike that of most kids his age. Ken actually grew up inside a jailhouse. His father, Dan Gates, was the sheriff of Bent County, and the job required the family to live in a small apartment directly above the county jail. While other children played on grassy lawns, Ken's playground consisted of cold iron bars, echoing footsteps in the corridors, and the clanging sound of cell doors closing. His mother, Nellie Sneed Gates, worked as the jail's cook. She not only cared for her family but also prepared meals for the inmates. Ken often watched her pass food through the bars, getting an early glimpse of a world few children ever saw. Those experiences left a lasting mark on him, memories that stayed vivid throughout his life. From a young age, Ken showed a natural gift for the arts, especially music. However, during the Great Depression, practicality often outweighed passion. Encouraged by his parents to pursue a stable career, Ken enrolled at Colorado College, aiming to become a doctor. For a while, he tried to follow that path, but deep down, he knew his heart wasn't in medicine. The call of music kept echoing within him, eventually leading him back to his true passion. After 2 years in medical school, Ken Curtis made a bold decision, to leave it all behind and follow his passion for singing. It was a risky move. America was still recovering from the Great Depression, and with World War II on the horizon, the future seemed uncertain. Even so, Ken's gamble soon began to pay off. In the early 1940s, he caught his first big break when he was invited to join Tommy Dorsey's band as a vocalist. Dorsey was already a music legend, leading one of the most popular orchestras in the country. Ken joined the group not long after Frank Sinatra had departed, a nearly impossible act to follow. But with his smooth, rich voice and natural stage presence, Ken quickly won audiences over. It was during this time that, on Dorsey's advice, he dropped his birth name, Curtis Wayne Gates, and adopted the stage name Ken Curtis, a name that sounded stronger, simpler, and perfect for show business. Under that name, his career truly began to flourish. After making his mark on the big band scene, Ken found his true home in Western music. He became the lead singer for the Sons of the Pioneers, a beloved Western group with a devoted fanbase and a string of radio and recording hits. With his warm, sincere vocals, Ken helped popularize timeless classics such as Room Full of Roses and Ghost Riders in the Sky, songs forever tied to the golden age of Western music. Few fans know that in the late 1940s, Ken also hosted a 15-minute syndicated radio show called Chuck Wagon Jamboree, produced in Los Angeles. The show ran for about 2 years with over 130 episodes. Each broadcast featured Ken performing Western ballads, engaging in light-hearted banter with a comedy troupe called the Novelty Aces, and closing each episode with a hymn. This unique blend of music and storytelling would later become the foundation of his on-screen persona. Yet, Ken wasn't content with being just a singer. His natural charm and charisma eventually opened doors to a new career in Hollywood. By the late 1940s and early 1950s, Ken transitioned into acting, appearing in Western-themed musicals and cowboy films, where he continued to build the legacy that would one day make him a household name. However, behind all the fame and success, Ken Curtis once revealed the names of 5 people in Hollywood he secretly disliked the most. At the top of that list was John Manteley. When it came to Gunsmoke producer John Manteley, the conflict was no longer mere speculation, it was quite real. Manteley was known for running a tight and demanding production. He was strict about budgets, meticulous with scripts, and not particularly open to actors seeking creative input. Ken Curtis was one of those who pushed back. By that time, Festus had become one of the show's most beloved characters, and Curtis felt he deserved both a larger role and better pay. Multiple reports suggest that Curtis and Manteley butted heads repeatedly over these very issues. Curtis wanted Festus to evolve into a more central figure in Dodge City, but Manteley didn't always share that vision. This tug-of-war over creativity and compensation became one of the rare moments when Curtis's frustrations were no longer just backstage gossip. They were real conflicts noticed by people around the set. Number 2. James Arness, the star of Gunsmoke. Arness wasn't just the lead actor. He was the face of the entire show. For 2 decades, he portrayed Marshal Matt Dillon, and his towering presence dominated nearly every scene. While audiences adored him, for his co-stars, living in his shadow wasn't always easy, especially for Ken Curtis. Ken Curtis, the man who brought the quirky and unforgettable Festus Hagen to life, quickly became a fan favorite. Yet, despite Festus's growing popularity, he always remained the deputy, forever playing second fiddle to James Arness's Marshal Dillon. As time went on, whispers began to circulate that Curtis sometimes grew frustrated with this dynamic. Fans speculated that he wished Festus could receive the same level of recognition as Dillon. But the spotlight rarely drifted away from Arness. Whether those feelings of resentment were real or simply fan-made stories, one thing is certain: the chemistry between the two on screen was undeniable. Together, they created some of the most iconic and memorable moments in television Western history. Number 3. Amanda Blake. Amanda Blake's Miss Kitty was the warm heart and soul of Dodge City, admired by fans and castmates alike. Amanda Blake, the woman behind the unforgettable Miss Kitty, was strong, fiery, and fiercely independent, bringing both warmth and emotional depth to Gunsmoke. For years, she shone as one of the series' brightest stars, adored by audiences everywhere. But as time passed and Festus became increasingly popular, rumors began to swirl of tension between Blake and Ken Curtis. Some claimed that Blake wasn't thrilled with Curtis's growing prominence, feeling that his rise might have drawn attention away from her long-established place on the show. Others insisted that the so-called rivalry was nothing more than tabloid exaggeration, fueled by gossip and fan speculation. Still, whispers of on-set friction persisted. Yet, when you watch their scenes together, it's impossible to ignore the genuine chemistry between Miss Kitty and Festus. Whether any real tension existed or not, they never let it affect their performances, a clear reflection of their professionalism and dedication. Number 4. Milburn Stone. Milburn Stone, who portrayed the wise yet often irritable Doc Adams, was one of the most seasoned actors on Gunsmoke. Having been part of the show from the very beginning, Stone carried a sense of authority and protectiveness over his role. Ken Curtis, however, joined the cast years later. By then, the group already had its own rhythm and hierarchy. According to behind-the-scenes rumors, Curtis and Stone didn't always see eye to eye. Some say their disagreements stemmed from script choices and disputes over how much screen time each character received. Both men were known for their strong personalities, and when two determined individuals share the same stage, it's only natural for sparks to fly. Still, those clashes never interfered with their professionalism. On screen, their interactions often felt incredibly real, perhaps because some of that tension carried over from real life. That subtle friction may have actually added depth to their performances. Number 5. Dennis Weaver. Before Ken Curtis ever rode into Dodge City, Dennis Weaver had already won over audiences as Chester Goode, Marshal Dillon's original deputy. With his trademark limp and homespun charm, Chester became one of television's most beloved characters. So when Weaver left the show to pursue new opportunities, fans wondered if anyone could possibly fill his boots. That's when Ken Curtis entered the picture as Festus Hagen. At first, comparisons between Chester and Festus were inevitable, and some believe Curtis felt the weight of living up to such a beloved predecessor. Though Weaver had moved on, his presence lingered, and fans often debated who played the better deputy. There were even whispers that Curtis may have quietly resented Weaver's legacy, though Festus would eventually stand on his own and earn just as much affection from viewers. Whether Ken truly disliked Weaver or simply felt the pressure of stepping into an iconic role, one thing is certain: replacing a fan favorite was no easy task. Yet Curtis managed to do it with charm, humor, and authenticity, proving that Festus wasn't just a replacement, he was a legend in his own right. Beyond Gunsmoke, Ken Curtis continued to shine in films that beautifully blended music with frontier storytelling, a perfect fit for a man who loved both singing and the spirit of the Old West. His talent and charisma soon connected him with some of the biggest names in Hollywood westerns. Curtis became a regular in John Ford's films, often sharing the screen with giants like John Wayne. And these weren't minor appearances, they were substantial, memorable roles that showcased his versatility. Even when standing beside icons like Wayne and Maureen O'Hara, Ken Curtis held his own, leaving a lasting impression as one of the most authentic and beloved faces of the American West. Though his film career was already impressive, Ken Curtis never shied away from taking on smaller, lesser-known projects. He often appeared in low-budget westerns and adventure films, productions that, over time, developed a loyal cult following. Ken wasn't chasing fame or glamour. What he cared about was finding roles with grit, heart, and authenticity, characters that felt real and carried the spirit of the frontier he loved so much. But all of that would eventually be overshadowed by the role that defined him for millions: Festus Hagen. In 1964, Ken joined the cast of Gunsmoke, one of television's longest-running and most beloved series. At that time, the show was at a crossroads. Dennis Weaver, who had played the beloved Deputy Chester Good, had left the series, and the producers needed someone who could bring a new spark, someone who could keep the audience engaged without losing what made Gunsmoke special in the first place. Ken Curtis was that perfect fit. Festus was originally intended to appear in just a single episode, but audiences instantly fell in love with him. His gravelly voice, homespun humor, and offbeat personality made him stand out. Festus was tough but funny, loyal yet never overly sentimental, a character that felt both rough-edged and real. Over time, he became the emotional center of the show, and Ken remained in the role for 11 years, appearing in more than 300 episodes. Off-screen, Ken approached his work with the same level of dedication he showed on camera. He deeply respected Gunsmoke's legacy and never delivered a half-hearted performance. Even when storylines grew repetitive or shooting schedules became exhausting, Ken gave every scene his full effort. Unlike many actors who grow weary of being tied to one role, he embraced Festus completely. Ken often said that he was proud to be part of something that meant so much to people, especially during a time when television had become the emotional heartbeat of American families. But away from the cameras, his life was not without hardship. Despite the fame and admiration, he faced heartbreak, difficult choices, and quiet personal struggles that few ever knew about. At the center of his world was his wife, a steady and loving presence who grounded him through the chaos of Hollywood. While Ken spent much of his career portraying the loyal cowboy and faithful sidekick, his own love story was far more complex. Behind the rugged charm and easy smile was a man shaped by early heartbreaks, the relentless pressures of show business, and, finally, a lasting love that brought him true peace. Before meeting Tori, the woman who would stand by his side until the very end, Ken Curtis had already experienced 2 marriages that ended quietly in heartbreak. His first marriage was to actress Lorraine Page in 1943. At the time, Ken was just beginning his musical journey and taking his first tentative steps into Hollywood, while Lorraine had earned a few minor acting credits and moved within the same entertainment circles. They were young, hopeful, and caught up in the fast-moving world of show business, all against the uncertain backdrop of wartime America. But the marriage was short-lived. The details are scarce, and there were no children. Those who knew them said that as their careers took them in different directions, the two simply drifted apart. Ken's second marriage drew far more attention because of who he married. In 1952, he wed Barbara Ford, the daughter of the legendary film director John Ford. By then, Ken had already been working with both Ford and John Wayne on a string of successful westerns. Becoming part of the Ford family brought a sense of prestige, but also its challenges. Barbara had grown up in the shadow of her father, a man known for his towering presence and perfectionism. Ken, on the other hand, was humble by nature, talented and respected, but never one to seek the spotlight or play the Hollywood game. For a time, they made it work. Their marriage lasted more than 12 years, but the pressures of fame, the long hours Ken devoted to Gunsmoke, and Barbara's own ambitions eventually took their toll. In 1964, the couple quietly divorced. There was no public scandal, no harsh words, just two people parting ways with mutual respect. Ken handled the separation with his usual grace and dignity. 2 years later, in 1966, Ken met the woman who would truly change his life, Tori Ahern Connolly. Unlike his previous wives, Tori had no ties to Hollywood and no interest in fame. She was genuine, kind, and grounded, the kind of woman who could make anyone feel instantly at home. From the very beginning, she loved Ken not for his fame or reputation, but for the man he was beneath it all. She supported his work on Gunsmoke, but never tried to involve herself in the spotlight. Their relationship blossomed not through grand gestures or red carpets, but through quiet, everyday moments, road trips, home-cooked dinners, and laughter that needed no audience. Although Ken and Tori never had children together, family life still played a central role in their world. Tori had 2 children from a previous marriage, and Ken embraced them as his own. He became a loving father figure, patient, gentle, and deeply committed. Over the years, Ken often described his life with Tori as one of his greatest blessings. Her presence softened him. The hard-working, disciplined man who had spent decades under the glare of studio lights became more at peace, more at ease. Tori encouraged him to slow down, reconnect with the world beyond Hollywood, and simply enjoy life. After Gunsmoke came to an end, Tori played an essential role in keeping Ken Curtis grounded, emotionally steady and free from the ego battles that often consumed his peers in Hollywood. Together, they traveled not for publicity or work, but simply to enjoy life. Whether it was fishing trips, long drives across the country, or visits to small-town Western festivals, Ken and Tori cherished every moment they shared. Fans still recognized Ken wherever they went, but fame never changed him. Tori handled the attention with grace, fully understanding the deep bond Ken had built with his audience. In their later years, the couple settled into a quiet life away from the chaos of Hollywood, devoted to one another for decades, a rare and beautiful thing in any world, but especially in show business. Still, even in what seemed like a perfect love story, life behind closed doors was never entirely smooth. Ken was a man who preferred privacy over publicity. Throughout his career, he avoided controversy and stayed clear of Hollywood gossip. Yet, even someone as humble and reserved as Ken couldn't completely escape the occasional spotlight. From time to time, certain moments in his life stirred curiosity, often for reasons he never intended. One of the most talked-about incidents came in 1987, long after Gunsmoke had completed its legendary run. CBS announced a reunion television movie titled Gunsmoke, Return to Dodge, which would bring back James Arness as Marshal Matt Dillon. Naturally, fans expected to see Ken Curtis reprise his iconic role as Festus Hagen, the beloved deputy who had appeared in over 300 episodes and become a cornerstone of the show's identity. But when the special aired, Ken was nowhere to be seen, and fans immediately took notice. His absence sparked questions and disappointment. Had there been a falling out? Had Ken retired? Or was he too ill to appear? The truth, as it turned out, was far simpler, though no less frustrating to many longtime fans. Ken had been invited to return as Festus, but the deal fell apart during contract negotiations. Multiple sources later revealed that he was offered what he felt was an insultingly low salary, especially for a character so deeply woven into Gunsmoke's legacy. Ken turned it down, not out of pride or resentment, but out of principle. After giving more than a decade of his life to the series, he believed his contribution deserved fair recognition. The decision divided fans. Some admired him for standing his ground, others felt let down by his absence. The studio never publicly explained the situation, and true to his nature, Ken remained silent, letting his dignity and his body of work speak for itself. Over the years, another strange rumor followed him, a persistent claim that Ken Curtis had a twin brother named Chester Curtis. The story appeared in fan magazines and online forums, often backed by vague, eyewitness accounts. But the truth is simple: no such brother ever existed. There are no records, no family mentions, and no evidence to suggest Ken ever had a twin. It was just another piece of Hollywood folklore surrounding a man who, ironically, had spent much of his life trying to live outside the myths of fame. Despite persistent rumors over the years, Ken Curtis did not come from a mysterious or sprawling family background. In truth, he was raised in a modest, close-knit household. The story about a twin brother named Chester Curtis was pure Hollywood fiction, a rumor that, like so many others, took on a life of its own. No records, no family statements, nothing credible ever supported the claim. It was born from imagination, not reality. Perhaps one of the more surprising aspects of Ken's public life had nothing to do with acting at all. It was his political convictions. In an era when most actors, especially those tied to Western films, stayed far away from politics, Ken quietly but firmly expressed his beliefs. During the 1964 presidential election, he openly supported Barry Goldwater, drawn to the senator's strong conservative ideals and independent spirit. Over a decade later, in 1976, Ken once again stepped into the political spotlight, this time campaigning for Ronald Reagan, the former actor turned political leader. He attended events, spoke in Reagan's favor, and didn't shy away from aligning himself with a cause he believed in. It was a bold move that earned him both admiration and criticism from fans, setting him apart as one of the few Western stars willing to speak his mind publicly. Away from the headlines, though, Ken's personal life remained deeply private. His wife, Tori, to whom he was married for more than 3 decades, preferred life far from the spotlight. She rarely gave interviews, avoided controversy, and never used her husband's fame for attention. Instead, she stayed true to herself, warm, approachable, and endlessly supportive. To those who met her, she wasn't Ken Curtis's wife. She was simply Tori, kind, genuine, and quietly strong. Still, even the most enduring partnerships face storms. Time has a way of testing everyone, and Ken and Tori were no exception. Fame fades, health shifts, and life seasons bring challenges that no amount of success can prevent. Behind the camera, when the applause faded and the scripts stopped coming, Ken faced battles that were far more personal and far more human than anything his characters ever endured. To millions, Ken Curtis would always be the steady hand, the dependable deputy, the man you could count on. But off-screen, his story was far more layered. There were moments of doubt, health struggles, and quiet reflection, all faced with the same quiet dignity that defined him on camera. Through it all, Tori never left his side. Her unwavering presence gave him strength, helping him navigate the ups and downs of fame, aging, and changing times. In the years after Gunsmoke, Ken gradually stepped away from the bright lights of television. He didn't vanish. He simply chose a slower, simpler life, one rooted in peace rather than performance.